Good morning and welcome to the Jerusalem Press Club's webinar in the series Israel is Alive and Kicking. I'm Talia Dekel. Tomorrow, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will meet with US President Trump, United Arab Emirates Foreign Minister Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan, and Bahrain's Foreign Minister Dr. Abdulatif bin Rashid Al Zayyan to sign the Abraham Accords. Joining us today is a man who knows a thing or two about the country slowly joining Israel's new circle of friends, Efraim Halevy. Mr. Halevy was chief of the Mossad between 1998 and 2002, following a long career in the defense service, as well as being Israel's ambassadors to the European Union institutions in Brussels. He was also national security advisor in the year 2003. Mr. Halevy, I would go on and talk all about your CV, but you are limited in your time. So first of all, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be with you.
So given your knowledge of the countries now accepting Israel's place in the world, are you at all surprised?
No, I'm not surprised because I think this was in the making for many, many years. And the fact of the matter is that we had a very, shall we say, robust relationship with many of the players who are now emerging from the dark.
Okay, does the fact, if we look specifically at Bahrain, because this is really the latest development, does the fact that between 60 to 70% of Bahrainians are Shiite put the move in any jeopardy, in your opinion?
Yes, I think it does. I know Bahrain quite well. I visited there 20 years ago and saw the ruler, who is now the ruler today. I think he is a very, very impressive gentleman. But I also think that one has to remember that, as you said, there's a large, excuse me 1 second. As you said, the majority of the people in Bahrain are Shiites. There were very, very violent events there about 10 years ago. There was an uprising, and it took support from Saudi Arabia, who sent troops across the freeway. There's a causeway there between Bahrain and Saudi Arabia to help quell the riots at the time. And these were initiated from Iran. So I think the problem is how to deal with this. This is something which the locals will have to do. I don't think Israel is in the position or should be in the position to involve itself in that aspect.
Okay, you were responsible for developing and maintaining ties to intelligence services in countries with which Israel did not have relations. If such ties existed in the past, has anything really changed in Israel's ability to connect to these sources? How does normalization contribute to this mechanism?
I think what has happened is that in the past, we had to keep these relations more or less unknown to the public. This is gradually changing. I think some of these relationships are now in the open. I'm not sure it's for the good, because once you have something in the public realm, you are influenced by public considerations. And we at the time could only content ourselves with dealing with the problems themselves without having to deal with the fallout of what could happen if something became public.
Could you give an example of what could happen if something became public? How would it impact the dynamics?
Could impact on the dynamics of the relationships. I'll give you one other example, and that is the example of Oman, with whom we have had a relationship going back almost 50 years. I was in Oman in 1975 to meet the ruler at the time, who died a few months ago. And we met on the border between Oman and the People's Republic of South Yemen, where there was a war going on. And I met the ruler in his forward command post. There we created a relationship which was a very important relationship, which, as you know, also blossomed immediately after the peace treaty with Jordan, when the late Yitzhak Rabin paid an official visit to Oman in a flight which took only 3.5 hours in both directions. So if you look at the mileage, you can understand that we didn't have to go around the Arabian Gulf in order to get to Oman and back.
Understood. So we've already established that the citizens themselves, people on the ground, might not necessarily be of one view as their leadership in terms of developments. So are you concerned at all about the safety, perhaps, of Israelis traveling to these countries now that they've been opened up?
I don't think there is a specific threat to the Israelis, although the only real threat, which of course is a serious threat, potentially, is that the Iranians would consider this as an opportunity to strike at Israelis. But I think the local authorities in these countries are well aware of this aspect, and they will know how to deal with it in an effective way.
So what you're saying is that if the Iranians use one of their proxies in one of these countries to plan such an attack, the likelihood of actually being able to execute them is small?
I don't want to categorize the threat in terms of small, big, or medium, but the local authorities there, the security authorities there, are well aware of threats of this kind. Whether this is foolproof, 100%, nothing is foolproof in life. And also this is not foolproof in life.
Understood. Do you think we should be concerned at all about a potential hit to Israel's qualitative military edge, given that the deals between the states and the West, the US included, will now be more acceptable? For instance, taking the F-35 as an example.
First of all, let me say something about this agreement, which we are now going to celebrate tomorrow. This is not a peace agreement because we were never at war with these countries. It's a normalization agreement. It is not, unfortunately, as the Prime Minister has described it, peace for peace. It is interest for interests. And each party has made concessions to the other party on matters which are important to the other side. Israel has undertaken to more or less shelve the whole idea of annexation in the West Bank. It has also undertaken to accept the Trump plan, which includes the creation of a Palestinian state. And in the case of the Emirates, for all practical purposes, it means to say that Israel will accept in the end the sale of F-35s to Emirates. I think there should be no misunderstanding on this, and maybe for domestic public reasons, the Prime Minister of Israel is phrasing himself otherwise, but it's clear that the wink and the nod has been given by Israel for this sale to American, shall we say, best of the best of the American air capability to the Emirates.
We mentioned Iran already as a potential threat, but how do these deals, sorry, I'm just muting someone. How do these deals impact Israel's dynamics with other intelligence services to cooperate vis-a-vis Iran's plans in the region?
I think what is under the radar will remain under the radar, and I don't think there is much danger in that. What I do think is that after the American elections towards the end of the year, we will see a possible attempt by the United States to enter into a dialogue with Iran. President Trump himself has said this months ago, that after the elections he intends to approach the Iranians to renew dialogue between them. And I think we should be ready for this, because the United States does not really wish to enter a war with Iran, and it doesn't want to try and destroy a country of 100 million people. And therefore, sooner or later, maybe what we're doing now is that when the moment comes, when the United States will decide to dialogue with Iran, Israel will not be in a position or will not desire to try and prevent this.
Given the devastating impact that sanctions have had on Iran and the crumbling of the JCPOA in the last few years, do you foresee Iran coming into these negotiations that you've spoken about in a different manner, with a different kind of humility, perhaps?
Humility is not one of the obvious and dominant traits in the Iranian character. By the way, neither is it in Israel either. We cannot be accused of humility. I think that Iran has its interests. Iran will view the situation in the region after the elections in the United States. And when the moment comes, and if there will be an American approach to Iran, whoever is in the White House, I think this will be answered positively.
Okay, looking at sort of the other countries involved in the region, surely Bahrain, which is under strong Saudi influence, received a green light from Riyadh. Do you expect Saudi Arabia to follow suit, or is this impossible?
Saudi relations with Israel go back many, many, many years. One of the, shall we say, the signposts of this long trajectory was in 1991, immediately after the first Iraqi war, when there was a conference in Madrid to try and jumpstart a negotiation between Israel and its immediate Arab neighbors. And at the opening of this conference, suddenly there was a figure appeared on the dais, and it was Bandar bin Sultan, who was the then Saudi ambassador in the United States. And he appeared alongside the then President of the United States, George Bush Sr. I'm saying this because this was not only a symbolic act, it was an act which showed that some of the things that have been happening behind the scenes will ultimately emerge in front of the scenes. So I think that the Saudi entry into this will ultimately come, but, and this is a big but with a capital B, the Saudis have stated that from their point of view, the solution of the Arab-Israel problem should be based on the Saudi roadmap, if you can call it that, which was published in the year 2002. They've repeated this in the last few days. And by the way, even Bahrain has said that they believe that the Saudi roadmap is a roadmap for the solution of the Palestinian problem. So I think that in this context, Israel would have to be prepared to revisit the Saudi program. It is not a diktat as it was described at the time. I happened to have been in Oman at the day that this appeared, and I received messages to that effect from the Saudis that this was not a Saudi diktat to Israel. There was a request at that time, which has never been published, that Israel and the Prime Minister at the time, Sharon, should not reject this program outright. And Sharon accepted this request, and he did not make a statement more or less rejecting the Saudi program. What he said was that he would not comment on a press interview which was a press interview between the Crown Prince Abdullah, who later became king, and Tom Friedman of the New York Times. So it must be understood that there are elements here which have been dormant for several years and are gradually coming up. In recent years, I think there have been more developments in this region and in this area, and we could expect more possibilities of a Saudi entry into this process. As the Saudis enter this process, Israel will have to enter this process and to meet this process with a different policy towards the Saudi program. And I think that just as we have not had peace with the Emirates, it will not be immediate peace with the Saudi leadership. It will be that under the understanding that you don't get something for nothing.
Understood. Does it matter who is the personality in the leadership, specifically with Saudi Arabia? If MBS eventually takes over, will that ease things, or does it not matter who's there?
I think this will depend on the way MBS feels when he takes over. But I will remind you that there was a conversation between King Salman of Saudi Arabia, he's still the king of Saudi Arabia, and President Trump, in which he repeated his adherence to the Saudi plan of 2002. And I think that ultimately Israel will have no option but to enter a dialogue which would include the Saudi program.
Understood. We have another question about technologies. Do you see Emiratis buying key military technology from Israel directly? And what drones, anti-drone, anti-missile systems?
I don't want to speculate on that, and I don't pretend to be up to date on this issue. I think it is an issue which might come up, but I believe that initially the Crown Prince of the Emirates is first and foremost interested in putting his hands on American technology, as it's been said very clearly.
Understood. Turning over to Dubai, it seems that the Mossad's assassination of Mabhouh in 2010 hasn't hampered reconciliation with Israel 10 years down the line. Why, in your opinion, has Israel been forgiven for this?
Look, I've been in my previous jobs in positions in which I have negotiated crises between intelligence services, and not necessarily with Dubai, but with others. And I can tell you that in the end, every mishap, every crisis is the immediate basis for a reconciliation. Because ultimately, the interests which are behind the existence of these relationships does not depend on one solitary event. It has to be taken care of. There have to be, and there have been in the past, events of similar nature elsewhere which have not received much publicity, in which we have negotiated to bring about the end of crises. I know of no major crisis that we have had, and we have had many major crises, which have not been negotiated and successful.
Well, I won't ask you about the incidents that you can't talk about. Do you think that relations could survive clashes with Hamas or Hezbollah in the next big campaign? Because usually the Arab states have to come out with some sort of condemnation. What do you foresee?
I don't quite understand the question, I'm sorry.
Should Israel be faced with yet another military campaign on a larger scale with Hamas in Gaza or with Hezbollah, either on the Lebanese or even Syrian border, do you foresee these new relationships between other Arab states surviving such large-scale military campaigns?
I believe they will. They will survive them. I think the area which we should look at more closely is the north of Israel. We have now a standoff situation with the Hezbollah, who are claiming that they have to settle an account which they have, which involved the killing of a senior Hezbollah figure a couple of months ago. There is a state of readiness in the north which has to be recognized. It's still there and will be there as long as the tension is not resolved. They want to settle the account. I hope we will prevent them from settling the account in the way they want to do it. But I think when this will happen, countries like the Emirates and Bahrain and Oman and even Saudi Arabia, when this happens, they will look the other way.
Over the last few days, we've heard some reactions from the Palestinians about the continued deals being made with the other states. Do you foresee a third intifada as having been hinted by them?
I don't think the Palestinians today are capable of mounting another intifada. What I do think is, I never have filled the role of being an advisor to the Palestinians. They've not sought my advice, thankfully. But I believe that they have now opportunities which are very, very unique. Just a couple of days ago, the personal assistant to the president, Jared Kushner, who is the son-in-law of the President Trump, and he's in charge of the, shall we say, of the Palestinian file on the part of the United States, has repeated the fact that the Palestinians in the Trump program for finding a solution to the Palestinian issue includes also a Palestinian state. And this was repeated just less than a week ago. I think the Palestinians, if they miss this opportunity of taking advantage of what is happening to try and to reinvigorate or reestablish a dialogue with the United States, I think this is the opportune moment. But they don't seem to be acting in that manner. If they miss this chance they have, I think possibly they will have lost any real chance for many, many, many years to come.
Regarding what you just said, if we look at the fact that annexation has at least been temporarily taken off the table, do you believe that there are confidence-building measures that can be made either on Israel's part or on the United States' part to bring them back to the table?
Well, I don't know. But if the Palestinians are interested in taking advantage of this unique opportunity that they have, it is for them to try and to seek the contact that they need. I was present at the conference several months ago, which was under Chatham House rules, in which a Gulf figure confronted a Palestinian who was in the room and said to him, "Look, we have heard what you're telling us in the last 70 years. It's been the same tale for 70 years. After 70 years of telling the same tale, don't you think it's time to seek a different narrative? Don't you realize that if you continue with this narrative, you will not only fail, but you will ultimately, shall we say, have to surrender almost unconditionally because of not seizing opportunities you've had along the time. So go back home and do your homework and come back with something new. Say something new. I think what is the important effect of what is happening the last few days is that what is happening is something new. And you see how the world reacts if something new happens. If the Palestinians want to achieve something, they have to come up with something new. The old story is dead on arrival.
Is this something new does it have the potential of having the Palestinians being left behind? Should they not adopt your advice as the move clearly indicates a departure from conventional wisdom that Israeli-Palestinian peace is a prerequisite for rapprochement with the Arab world?
I don't know how to answer your question. All I will say is that I don't want to second guess the Palestinians, but I would hope there would be new figures speaking on behalf of the Palestinians. You know, one of the things that has been very, very clear is that on the Israeli side, the figures who have led Israel over the years have been a long string of Israeli leaders who have come and gone. The present leader has been there for more than 10 years, and I assume he's nearer the end than the beginning of his reign. But the Palestinian faces are the same faces all the time, and I think it has to be new faces. I know Palestinians, I've met Palestinians, young people, younger people, by the way, as we say, graduates of the best university that the Palestinians have gone through in study of the Israel, and that is the Israeli prisons. I met the people who have served for 18 years in the prison, 20 years in prison. Yahya Sinwar, who is now the leader of Gaza, was spent many years in an Israeli prison, and I assume he knows maybe more about Israel than many Israelis know by studying the prison wardens, by the contact he has had with Israelis. There must be a new face which has to emerge, and I think it's up to them to do their homework. We cannot impose a leadership of our wish. By the way, we tried in the past, and it was a big failure. They have to come up with their new leadership.
Understood. We are actually out of time, but I have one more question that's come in from a journalist, and then I promise we'll let you go. I'm not entirely sure of the context, but they're asking what do you make of concerns that the joint statement, as currently written, threatened to undermine the status quo on the Temple Mount, itself being alone reserved for Muslim prayer, while the rest of the site would become open to other faiths. Again, I'm not sure what the context is, but you can analyze it in kind of a general way.
The issue of the Temple Mount is probably the most explosive issue in the Muslim world. Not only the Arab world, it's the Muslim world. When we negotiated the treaty with Jordan, and I was a serious figure in this negotiation between Israel and the leadership of Jordan, King Hussein, between Rabin and King Hussein. I was the personal envoy of Rabin there. Hussein often said to me that he saw me as a personal envoy of his as well. I took it as a compliment. But in the end, we had a clause in the Israeli-Jordanian treaty which deals with Temple Mount and with the role of Jordan on the Temple Mount. Now, I'm not saying that this is the only idea that, or the only principle which will remain. There might be additional aspects to this, and I can imagine what they might be. But I think that in the end, one of the issues that will become very, very clear is if, as a result of the peace between us and the Emiratis, we will have a massive stream of Emiratis coming to Israel to visit the Temple Mount. I'm sure that this is something which had to be taken into account. I'm sure, not because I know, because the negotiation was actually handled by one or two people. This was not a negotiation which was which was handled by the normal diplomatic tools that Israel has. But I think that this is something which has to be taken into account, and Israel will have to, as I said, pay this price. It is a price which it cannot avoid. How they go about it, I don't know, but certainly people who are not privy to the negotiation, but who will have the responsibility of dealing with this, like the security service, like the Mossad in some respects, will have to face up to this challenge and to find a solution to it. There's no question at all about it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Halevy. I hear that you already have some other engagements on your plate. So any other questions that unfortunately we've run out of time to answer, we will try to follow up directly with Mr. Halevy. Efraim Halevy, former Chief of Mossad, thank you again for your time this morning.
Thank you. All the best to you. And Happy New Year to everybody.
Shana Tova, Happy New Year.
Shana Tova.
And thank you to my colleagues, JPC Director General Uri Dromi and Press Coordinator Rachel Gziel for putting together this event. Don't forget to hop back on the line at 2 p.m. for our webinar with Dr. Ran Balitzer, head of the team consulting Israel's coronavirus project manager, for the latest information on the country's battle with the pandemic. Thank you to everyone again.
Thank you.